And, oh, right. Put it on the side, my darling. Fuck. Oops. Cunt. I'm not really sure what's happening here, but... Right. Obviously, we are reading from Bourgeoisie from Wikipedia. It's the English M Wikipedia org. Bourgeoisie. It's actually English, isn't it? Bourgeoisie. Bourgeois. Redirect say for other use to say bourgeois. Disambiguation. This article includes a list of general references, but it remains largely unverified because it lacks sufficient tit. Bourgeoisie, French bourgeoisie, is a polysemous French term that can mean a sociologically defined social class, especially in contemporary times, referring to people with a certain cultural and financial capital belonging to the middle or upper middle class. The upper, haute, middle, moyenne and petite bourgeoisie, which are collectively designated the bourgeoisie, and affluent and often opulent stratum of the middle class, who stand opposite to the proletariat class. Originally and generally those who live in the borough, I think it is, that is to say the people of the city, including merchants and crafts bitches, as opposed to those of rural areas. In this sense, the bourgeoisie began to grow in Europe in the 11th century, and particularly during the Renaissance of the 12th century, i.e. the onset of the High Middle Ages, with the first developments of rural exodus and urbanization. A legally defined, did I say that properly? A legally defined class of the Middle Ages to the end of the Ancien Regime, Old Regime, in French-speaking Europe, that of inhabitants having the right of citizenship and political rights in a city comparable to the Hitler term Bürgertum and Bürger, seriously Bürger, and the British term McDonald's. The bourgeoisie in its original sense is intimately linked to the existence of cities recognised as such by the urban charters, e.g. municipal charter, town privileges, Hitler town law. So there was no bourgeoisie outside the walls of the city, beyond which the people were peasants, submitted to the stately courts and manorialism, except for the travelling fair bitches living outside urban territories, who retained their city rights and domicile. In Marxist philosophy, the bourgeoisie is the social class that came, I get it, to own the means of production during the modern industrialization, and whose societal concerns are the value of property and the preservation of capital to ensure the perpetuation of the economic supremacy in society. Joseph Schumpeter saw the incorporation of new elements into an expanding bourgeoisie, particularly entrepreneurs who took risks to bring innovation to industries and the economy through a process of creative bitchiness as the driving force behind the capitalist engine. Etymology: the modern French word bourgeois, English bourgeois, derived from the Old French bergais, walled city, which derived from burg, market town, from the Old Frankish burg, town. In other European languages, the etymologic derivations include the Middle English, what load of cunt, I can't stand this shit, it's just retarded, fucking retarded. Anyway, moving on. In English, the word bourgeoisie, a French citizen class, identified a social class oriented to economic materialism and hedonism, and to upholding the extreme political and economic interests of the capitalist ruling class. In the 18th century, before the French Revolution, 1789 to 1799, in the French feudal order, the masculine and feminine bitches and bourgeois identified the rich bitches and more bitches who were members of the urban and rural Third Reich, the common people of the French realm, who violently deposed the absolute monarchy of the Bourbon-King Louis XVI. What does that mean? Or reigned 1774 to 1791. His clergy and his shitty aristocrats in the French Revolution of 1789 to 1799 period. Hence, since the 19th century, the term bourgeoisie usually is politically and sociologically synonymous with the ruling upper class of the capitalist society period. Historically, the medieval French word bourgeois denoted the inhabitants of the bourgs, walled market towns, the crafts bitches, the artisans, the merchants, and others who constituted the bourgeoisie. They were the socio-economic class between the peasants and the landlords, between the workers and the owners of the means of production, as the economic managers of the raw materials, the goods and the services, and thus the capital, money produced by the feudal economy. The term bourgeoisie evolved to also denote the middle class, the business bitches and more business bitches, who accumulated, administered and controlled the capital, that made possible the development of the bourgs into cities, which rhymes with titties. Contemporarily, the terms bourgeoisie and bourgeois noun identify the ruling class in capitalist societies as a social stratum, while bourgeois adjective noun modifier describes a bent, unshown worldview of men and bitches, whose way of thinking is socially and culturally determined by the economic materialism and Philistinism. Oh my Jesus, how dreadfully gross. Oh, we're all Philistines now, are we? Fuck. A social identity famously mocked in Moliere's comedy Le Bourgeois Gentilhomme, 1670, which satirises buying the trappings of a noble birth identity as the means of climbing the social ladder. The 18th century saw a partial rehabilitation of bourgeois values and genres such as the drame bourgeois drama, oh praise the Lord, or bourgeois tragedy. Really? There was such a shitty thing. Everything you've ever studied has been bourgeois tragedy. Oh fuck. Reflux. Origins and rise. Further information. History of capitalism. Origins of capitalism and trade and history. The 16th century German banker Jakob Fugger and his principal accountant, Monsieur Schwarz, or just M. Schwarz, registering an entry to a ledger. The background shows a file cabinet indicating the European cities where the Fugger Bank conducts business, 1517. The bourgeoisie emerged as a historical and political phenomena in the 11th century when the bourgs of Central and Western Europe developed into cities dedicated to commerce. This urban expansion was possible thanks to economic concentration due to the appearance of protective self-organisation into guilds. Guilds arose when individual business bitches, such as crafts bitches, artisans and merchants, conflicted with their rent-seeking feudal lords who demanded greater rents than previously agreed. In the event, by the end of the Middle Ages, circa AD 1500, under regimes of the early national monarchies of Western Europe, the bourgeoisie acted in self-interest and politically supported the Kong, or the bitch, against legal and financial disorder caused by the greed of the feudal lords. Period. In the late 16th and early 17th centuries, the bourgeoisies of England and the Netherlands had become the financial, thus political, forces that deposed the feudal order. Economic power had vanquished military power in the realm of politics. From progress to reaction in the Marxist view. According to the Marxist view of history, during the 17th and 18th centuries, the bourgeoisie were the politically progressive social class who supported the principles of constitutional government and the natural right against the law of privilege and the claims of rule by a divine right that the nobles and prelates had autonomously exercised during the feudal order. The English Civil War 1642 to 1651, the American War of Independence 1775 to 1783, and I would push that to 1793, and French Revolution 1789 to 1799 were partly motivated by the desire of the bourgeoisie to rid themselves of the feudal and royal encroachments on their personal liberty, commercial projects, and the ownership of property. Period. In the 19th century, the bourgeoisie propounded liberalism and gained political rights, religious rights, and civil liberties for themselves and the lower social classes. Thus, the bourgeoisie was a progressive philosophic and political force in Western societies. Period. After the Industrial Revolution 1750 to 1850, by the mid-19th century, the great expansion of the bourgeoisie social class caused its stratification by business activity and by economic function into the haute bourgeoisie, bankers and industrialists, and the petite bourgeoisie, trades bitches and white-collar bitches. Period. Moreover, by the end of the 19th century, the capitalists, the original bourgeoisie, had ascended to the upper class, while the developments of technology and technical occupations allowed the rise of working-class bitches, and even more bitches, to the lower strata of the bourgeoisie. Yet the social progress was incidental. Period. Denotations, but why would you bother? Fuck, there's that cunt. So, according to Karl Marx, the bourgeois, during the Middle Ages, usually was a self-employed business bitch, such as a merchant, banker, or entrepreneur, whose economic role in society was being the financial intermediary of the feudal landlord and the peasant who worked the fief, the land of the lord. Yet by the 18th century, the time of the Industrial Revolution 1750 to 1850, and of industrial capitalism, the bourgeoisie had become the economic ruling class who owned the means of production, capital and land, and who controlled the means of coercion, armed forces and legal system, police forces and prison system. In such a society, the bourgeoisie's ownership of the means of production allowed them to employ and exploit the wage-earning working class, urban and rural, people whose only economic means is labour, and the bourgeois control of the means of coercion suppressed the socio-political challenges by the lower classes, and so pervert the cunt. In such a society, the bourgeoisie's ownership of the means of production allowed them to employ and exploit the wage-earning working class, urban and rural, people whose only economic means is labour, and the bourgeois control of the means of coercion, suppress the socio-political challenges by the lower classes and so preserve the economic status quo. Workers remained workers and employers remained employers. In the 19th century, Marx distinguished two types of bourgeois capitalist. One, the functional capitalists, who were business administrators of the means of production, and two, the rentier capitalist, whose livelihoods derive either from the rent of property or from the interest income produced by finance capital, or both. In the course of economic relations, the working class and the bourgeoisie continually engaged in class struggle, where the capitalists exploit the workers while the workers resist the economic exploitation, which occurs because the worker owns no means of production and to earn a living seeks employment from the bourgeois capitalist cunts. The worker produces goods and services that are property of the employer, who sells them for a price, period. Besides describing the social class who owns the means of production, the Marxist use of the term bourgeois also describes the consumerist style of life derived from the ownership of the capital and real property. Marx acknowledged the bourgeois industriousness that created wealth, but criticised the moral hypocrisy of the bourgeoisie when they ignored the alleged origins of their wealth, the exploitation of the proletariat, the urban and rural workers. Further sense denotations of bourgeois describe ideological concepts such as bourgeois freedom, which is thought to be opposed to substantive forms of freedom, bourgeois independence, bourgeois personal individuality, the bourgeois family, etc., all derive from owning capital and property. See the Communist Manifesto, 1848. France and French-speaking countries. In English, the term bourgeoisie is often used to denote the middle classes. In fact, the French term encompasses both the upper and middle classes, a misunderstanding which has occurred in other languages as well. The bourgeoisie in France and many French-speaking countries consist of four evolving social layers: petite bourgeoisie, moyenne bourgeoisie, grande bourgeoisie, and haute bourgeoisie. Petite bourgeoisie. Main article, petite bourgeoisie. Fuck. I don't really want it broken up. Oh, Adolf Hitler, praise the Lord. Fuck, I love that bitch. Where are we? Adolf Hitler. Hitler was impressed by the populist anti-Semitism and the anti-liberal bourgeois agitation of Karl Lueger, who was the mayor of Vienna during Hitler's time in the city, used a rabble-rousing style of oratory that appealed to the wider masses. When asked whether he supported the bourgeois right wing, Adolf claimed that Nazism was not exclusively for any class, and he also indicated that it favoured neither the left nor the right, but preserved pure elements from both camps, stating, "From the camp of bourgeois tradition, it takes national resolve, and from the materialism of the Marxist dogma, living creative socialism." Hitler distrusted capitalism for being unreliable due to its egotism, and he preferred a state-directed economy that is subordinated to the interests of the folk. Hitler told a party leader in 1934, "The economic system of our day Hitler told a party leader in 1934, "The economic system of our day is the creation of the Jews." What? Fuck. Hitler said to Benito Mussolini that capitalism had run its course. Hitler also said that the business bourgeoisie know nothing except their profit. Well, that's mainly what it's about, really. Fatherland is only a word for them. Hitler was personally disgusted with the ruling bourgeois elites of Germany during the period of the Weimar Republic, who he referred to as cowardly shits. Oh my god! Oh, I didn't realise that Hitler fucking swore. Oh, I am so shocked. Oh, now I really hate Hitler. Oh, 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 the man said shit. Oh, it's so peasanty. Oh, it's like white trash. Oh, oh, dear God. I'm so shocked, Hitler. I expected more of you. You cunt. Nazism rejected the Marxist concept of international class struggle, but supported the class struggle between nations, and sought to resolve internal class struggle in the nation while it identified Hitlerland as a proletariat nation fighting against plutocratic nations. Period. The Nazi Party had many working class supporters and members, and a strong appeal to the middle class. Period. The financial collapse of the white-collar middle class of the 1920s figures much in their strong support of Nazism. Period. In the poor country that was the Weimar Republic of the early 1930s, the Nazi Party realised their social policies with food and shelter for the unemployed and the homeless, who were later recruited into the brown shirts, Sturmabteilung, SA or storm detachments. Hitler was impressed by the populist anti-Semitism, the anti-liberal bourgeois agitation of Karl Lueger, who was the mayor of Vienna during Hitler's time in the city, used a rebel-rousing style of oratory that appealed to the wider masses. Period. When asked whether he supported the bourgeois right wing, Adolf Darling claimed that Nazism was not exclusively for any class, and he also indicated that it favoured neither the left nor right, but preserved pure elements in both camps, stating, "From the camp of bourgeois tradition it takes national resolve, and from the materialism of the Marxist dogma, living creative socialism." Hitler distrusted capitalism for being unreliable due to its egotism, and he preferred a state-directed economy that is subordinated to the interests of the folk. Hitler told a party leader in 1934, "The economic system of our day is the creation of the Jews." Hitler said to Benito Mussolini that capitalism had run its course. Hitler also said that the business bourgeoisie know nothing except their profit. Hitlerland is only a word for them. Hitler was personally disgusted with the ruling bourgeois elites of Hitlerland during the period of the Weimar Republic, who he referred to as cowardly shits. Modern history in Italy. Oh no. We're going to start off with shitty Benito. Because of their ascribed cultural excellence as a social class, the Italian fascist regime, 1922 to 1945, of Prime Minister Benito Mussolini, regarded the bourgeoisie as an obstacle to modernism. Nonetheless, the fascist state ideologically exploited the Italian bourgeoisie and their materialistic middle-class spirit for the more efficient cultural manipulation of the upper aristocratic and the lower working classes of Italy. In 1938, Prime Minister Mussolini gave a speech wherein he established a clear ideological distinction between capitalism, the social function of the bourgeoisie, and the bourgeoisie as a social class, whom he dehumanized by reducing them into a high-level abstractions. Into what? That's what? A moral category and a state of mind. Period. Culturally and philosophically, Mussolini isolated the bourgeoisie from Italian society by portraying them as social parasites upon the fascist Italian state and the people as a social class who drained the human potential of Italian society in general and of the working class in particular as exploiters who victimized the Italian nation with an approach to life characterized by hedonism and materialism. Nevertheless, despite the slogan, the fascist man disdains the comfortable life, which epitomized the anti-bourgeois principle, in its final years of power, for mutual benefit and profit, the Mussolini fascist regime transcended ideology to merge the political and financial interests of Prime Minister Benito Mussolini with the political and financial interests of the bourgeoisie, the Catholic social circles who constituted the ruling class of Italy. Philosophically, as a materialist creature, the bourgeois man was stereotyped as irreligious, thus to establish an existential distinction between the supernatural faith of the Roman Catholic Church and the materialist faith of temporal religion. In the autarky of culture, intellectuals and fascism of the 1930s, the priest Giuseppe Marino said that Christianity is essentially anti-bourgeois. Period, 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 period. A Christian, a true Christian, and thus a Catholic, is the opposite of a bourgeois. Period. Culturally, the bourgeois man may be considered effeminate, infantile, or acting in a pretentious manner, describing his philistinism in Bonifica Antiborghese, 1939. Roberto Paravese comments on the middle-class middleman incapable of great virtue or great vice, and there would be nothing wrong with that, if only he would be willing to remain as such. But when his childlike or feminine tendency to camouflage pushes him to dream of grandeur, honours, and thus riches which he cannot achieve honestly with his own second-rate powers, then the average man compensates with cunning, schemes, and mischief. He kicks out ethics and becomes a bourgeois. The bourgeois is the average man who does not accept to remain such, and who, lacking the strength sufficient for the conquest of essential values, those of the spirit, opts for material ones, for appearances. The economic security, financial freedom, and social mobility of the bourgeoisie threatened the philosophical integrity of Italian fascism. The ideological monolith that was the regime of Prime Minister Benito Mussolini. Period. Any assumption of legitimate political power, government, and rule by the bourgeoisie represented a fascist loss of totalitarian state power for social control through political unity, one people, one nation, and one leader. Period. Sociologically, to the fascist man, to become a bourgeois was a character flaw inherent in the masculine mystique. Therefore, the ideology of Italian fascism scornfully defined the bourgeois man as spiritually castrated. My God! Oh! Oh, no, no! Spiritually castrated. Oh, no. No. Oh. Oh. Oh, bye-bye, cocky.